Australian Super Rugby Team of the Decade. Now remember, this is not my team. This is the official Super Rugby Team of the Decade, available on the Super Rugby website. I'll put it in the description. I've already had a look through their picks for the South African team, which was interesting, to say the least. And I have had a look at the New Zealand team, which for the most part I thought was a bit better than the South African one. Just drawn on my hand. But yeah, we'll have a look at the Aussie team, and you guys can let me know your thoughts. A couple of things I should say, which I've noticed having a look at the two teams prior to this one, is that it is the decade, so they're looking at 2010 to 2019. And seemingly they have mostly gone with totals in terms of their stats. It seems to be purely a stat-based team from Opta's stats, and it seems to be totals among those, 2010, 2019, those 10 years of rugby. So players who played finished in 2015, started in 2005, generally don't make these teams because they didn't do enough years, whereas some grafter who maybe didn't get an overseas contract but stayed in Super Rugby for like 8 of the 10 years or something like that, or maybe even 10, is more likely to get in the team than a superstar, or just the career didn't happen during those 10 years kind of thing. Anyway, that being said, let's get on with him. I have seen their list, I haven't seen their stats, but let's go through them. So, loose head prop. They have gone with James Slipper. Interestingly, they've put him in there only as Brumbies. They haven't acknowledged his Reds status like they did with some of the other players who played across more than one team. They said for James Slipper, made 808 tackles throughout the last decade of Super Rugby, more than any other prop. More than any other prop. Man, that's across the board. Sometimes they narrow it down to just New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. Nope, more than any other prop, which is impressive. As well as 25 offloads and 11 clean breaks. Slipper's a pretty good pick, I think. Yeah, there's other good props out there from Aussie Rugby, but he's been pretty consistent over the last 10 years. He had a bit of a time off with some off the field stuff, but when he's on the park, I'm pretty happy he's there for the most part. Tight head prop. They have gone with another Brumbies man, Alan Alatoa. I feel like he's one of the best props in the world, to be honest. I think he doesn't get the credit that perhaps he's due because the Wallabies themselves have been kind of underperforming in this time. Now, I should say this isn't about the Wallabies. This is about Super Rugby stats only, but still, at Super Rugby level, he's also been busting it up. 368 carries and 530 tackles across the last decade. Managed a try assist in his opening 2 appearances of the 2020 edition. Oh, so they've included 2020. Okay. That makes sense. Wouldn't that make it 11 years? Anyway. Okay, he's had a couple of try assists as well. That's kind of a random one to put in at the end, 2 try assists. I guess the stats can't really account for his scrummaging, which is pretty good for his contributions to that Brumbies maul, but there you go. They've listed 2 Brumbies guys as their top. Who else did I think of in terms of props? I thought maybe Kepu, and maybe did I have somebody else? I think that was pretty much it. So Kepu from the Waratahs, I thought put in a pretty good shift. But yeah, hooker, they have gone with Folau Faenga from the Brumbies. I'm not sure how many seasons he's played. I didn't look it up before the video. Not that many, but he has been a try-scoring machine. Absolute try-scoring machine. So it says it scored at least 1 try in 5 consecutive games to open the 2019 season. No Australian has enjoyed a longer try-scoring streak in the last decade. That Brumbies maul is a heck of a thing. And they kind of did the same thing in the South African team where they put in Malcolm Marx and mentioned his try scoring. So I guess, in rugby, try scoring is the ultimate. So maybe try scoring trumps everything else. I would have thought maybe Pilota now or maybe Stephen Moore for the team of the decade. But Falafel has scored a lot of tries. So, fair enough. They haven't mentioned anything about scrummaging, line-out stats, tackling, just his tries. So, fair call. There you go. Locks. They have gone with Luke Jones for one. They said make 756 carries, only one of 4 Australian forwards to make 750 plus in the last decade, as well as 814 tackles, won 244 lineouts, including 20 steals. Those are actually really good numbers for Luke Jones. He's always been a good player, but just at a glance, they seem really good. And the other man they've gone for is Matt Phillip. Matt Phillip averaged 4 lineouts, 1 per game, made a total of 22 clean breaks, and scored 6 tries in Super Rugby. How many years has Matt Phillip been playing Super Rugby in the last decade? Because I feel like, again, there's other guys. I wrote down Rory Arnold had a pretty big contribution to Super Rugby. His lineout stats were phenomenal. Sam Carter was around for yonks. I mean, even... what's Checker's favourite guy? Not Ned Hannigan, the other one. Jeez, you know the one. Played for the Reds, then went to the Tars. Current captain of the Tars. Oh, I just can't picture his... I can picture his face, I can't say his name. Even he's probably over the last 10 years clocked up a fair few good numbers. Will Skelton probably didn't stay in Super Rugby long enough, I guess. But, yeah. Matt Phillips seems like a bit of an odd one, but he is a dynamic lock, so that's who they've gone for. Loose forwards. They have gone for Sean McMahon. Now, that guy is a real loss to Aussie Rugby. It's a real shame that he is no longer around. And I've seen his interviews, or at least the written form of his interviews since he left, whether he would come back. They were trying to talk about him as to whether he would come back for the World Cup in 2019. And he seems pretty happy in Japan. Like, he's earning good coin. His body's not as busted as he said it was getting playing in Super Rugby. So, yeah. For his stats, it says 1,172 run meters from 350 carries, which is a pretty good return. Beat 144 defenders, third most of any Aussie forward. 410 tackles with a 92% success rate in the last decade of Super Rugby. How many seasons did he play as well? Interesting. Number 8, they've gone with Amanaki Mafi. Again, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of seasons under his belt. Was he with the Rebels for 2 seasons or more? I mean, again, very, very good when he was there. 20 plus carries on 5 occasions across the last decade of Super Rugby, more than any other forward. That seems pretty light in terms of their description. Made 20 plus carries on 5 occasions. So in 5 games, he's gone 20 plus carries. But when you're looking at a whole decade, I feel like you can probably dig a bit deeper than that. He is a dynamic player. Loves running with the ball, makes things happen. Just look at that 2015 game against South Africa for Japan that he played in. But, yeah, I'm not sold on that one. And the other one they've gone for is Michael Hooper. His one's probably pretty straightforward, I would imagine. Won a Super Rugby title, gained more meters, 4,202, than any other forward in the last decade of Super Rugby. That's across the board. So that's a proper stat. And was the only forward to make 100 or more clean breaks with 107. Yeah, he's one of those forwards who looks like he could play 13 in another life. So, yeah, Hooper's a pretty dynamic ball carrier. I did write a few names. There's no David Pocock, which is interesting, but I guess he has had a long time away from Super Rugby. Like a couple of seasons he just had ended before they started, right? His knees. He went overseas, so maybe he just didn't clock up the miles. I would have thought Higginbotham's probably put a few more miles on the clock than Murphy. But, yeah. Wycliffe Palu, he's been gone for a while. Did I look up how many years he played? No, I didn't. Must have been like 5? Don't know. So, I'm sure there are others. Do suggest the other guys as well, because I'm sure there are more. But that's the forward pack they've gone with for the Aussie Super Rugby Team of the decade. Number 9 is probably a pretty easy one. They've gone with Will Guinea. I mean, was there any other guys who probably put a threat up to him? Nick White, Phipps? Probably not. I think Guinea was the standout guy, especially 2011. He was the best 9 in the world, I think, by quite some way. Gained 167 metres in round 6 of 2012 and 144 in round 13 of 2012. No other scrum half has gained as many metres in the Super Rugby game in the last decade. So he runs a ton, yeah, that's for sure. And interestingly, they've only listed him as Rebels as well. Seriously, in the other teams, they listed like all the teams they played for. He played for the Reds too. But yeah, I feel like he's probably got really good try assist numbers. I know with the Rebels, he was getting try assists left, right, and centre. Yeah. I mean, good stats in individual games, but again, you look in the decade, I would have thought there's probably better ones you can pull from there as well. 10, maybe also pretty self-explanatory. Over the last 10 years, they're going with Bernard Foley. I mean, maybe Quade Cooper, maybe Christian Liliafano, but Bernard Foley's pretty much been there the majority of the decade. 56 try assists throughout the decade, more than any other Australian player. Only Beauden Barrett, 16, has made more try assists by kick than Foley, who made 11. Wow. Okay, so they both like the old cross kick to set up a try. Well, with Israel Folau playing on his team, that is a fair bit easier to do. Not that I'm taking away from Foley. You still got to put the ball in the right place, but he's definitely a good target to be kicking at, for sure. Okay. Midfielders. This one I think is probably a solid couple of picks. I've gone with Samu Karevi. Probably pretty hard to argue with. I'm not sure how many years he clocked up as well, but 117 offloads, fourth most of any Australian in the last decade of Super Rugby. 108 clean breaks, 3,940 metres gained, and scoring 26 tries. Yeah, that guy's a beast of a player. His offensive stats are always through the roof. He's not someone you can just replicate at all. I mean, his defensive stats are always slightly poor, but he does attempt a lot more tackles than most guys in his position as well, which makes him look a bit worse than he actually is. But yeah, man, pretty happy with that. And the other one they've gone with is Tavita Kurandrani. So they've said for him, played the most Super Rugby games of any outside back in the last decade. Really? Has played the most Super Rugby games of any outside back in the last decade. Far out. I mean, that's a participation stat, but still, that's impressive. I didn't realize it would have been him. Must have been relatively injury-free, that fella. He's gained 3,773 metres from 866 carries, 96 clean breaks, and beaten 220 defenders. The guy is another proper tough player to handle when he's got ball in hand, so I think Karevi and Kurandrani have been a pretty big force for both of their teams throughout the last 10 years of Super Rugby, for how long have they been playing. Outside backs. Maybe there'll be a bit of controversy here, I'm not sure. Did I put any other midfielders down? Oh, maybe Adam Ashley Cooper, but again, he floated around from different positions. I put Kurtley Beale, but maybe he's missed out because of the different positions he's floated through as well. He's played 10, he's played 12, he's played 15. So, yeah. There'll be others, do let me know. Outside backs. It feels like a while since I've seen him play, but Joe Tamani used to play in that tandem with Henry Spate, was a pretty good pair of wingers. Tamani made 5 clean breaks against the Waratahs in round 8 of 2016. Only once in the last decade has any Brumbies player made more in a single Super Rugby game. I'm not blown away by that stat, to be honest. But Tamani's a good winger. I feel like they could have done more with a bit of research on what else he has done. I wonder how many seasons Naravoro played. It wasn't that many, was it? But he would have had some good numbers as well. Fullback, they have gone with Israel Folau. Probably not surprising. That guy, they've only written 2 lines about him. which is the fewest of every single player. The next has got at least 3. Folau scored 60 tries after making his debut in Super Rugby in 2013, breaking the all-time record. Didn't even play the whole 10 years and broke the all-time Super Rugby scoring record. So he is a very, very dangerous player under the high ball. I guess there's no stat to measure that. Try assists, he'd have a bunch. Clean breaks, defenders beaten, all that stuff. Yep. And lastly, they have gone with the aforementioned Henry Spate. Only Israel Folau, 156, has made more clean breaks than Spate's 126 among Australians in the last decade of Super Rugby. Spate also made 78 offloads and crossed for 49 tries, which in itself is pretty phenomenal. So that is the Super Rugby Team of the Decade officially by the Super Rugby website. I did think Dick beat Ioane for a while, but he only played for 3 years plus a brief stint at the Crusaders. So, yeah, I'm sure there are other outside backs as well. But, oh yeah, I forgot to say, they've also chosen a Super Rugby player of the decade. Now, if you've watched my New Zealand and South Africa videos, you'll probably know who it's going to be. But, I mean, I might have thought if I was picking from these guys, maybe Hooper Guinea in terms of their length of service and accomplishments. Both won Super Rugby titles, but they've gone with Bernard Foley. So they picked fly halves for all 3 of the teams. They picked Bowden Barrett, they picked Elton Yankees, and they've picked Bernard Foley. Super Rugby Player of the Decade for Australia. Try assists 56, points 1,095, tries 29, conversions 244, penalty goals 154, defenders beaten 226. Yeah, he gets a bit of grief, but I do like Foley as a player. His kicking was a bit hot and cold, but when he was on, obviously the nickname of the Iceman. He kicked that kick in the Super Rugby final, so can't take that away from him. But like, I really think Guinea at one point was the best 9 in the world, whereas I never thought Foley was the best 10, if that makes sense. But yeah, a few big guys to miss out. Like I mentioned, Kurtley Beale, even though he took off overseas for a while. David Pocock, I'll have to look up how many games he actually played. Like Eben Etzebeth missed out on the on the South African version of this team. And I thought that was curious, but some people mentioned that he's got more Springboks caps than he does Stormers caps because he was just always injured for his team, but always available at international level. So yeah, that is the Super Rugby Team of the Decade for the Aussie teams. What do you guys reckon? As I said, some pretty big names to miss out. There will be other guys that have slipped my mind that you guys will be able to mention. 5 Brumbies they've listed. Even though these guys shifted teams around, they've listed it as 5 Brumbies, 5 Rebels. I forgot to mention some of the guys who played for the Force as well. Hodgman's not there. The Honey Badger's not there. So there's also a few other guys who've missed out, who played there as well. I'm sure there'll be others. Adam Coleman missed out in lock. Jeez, that's a bit of an odd one, isn't it? But yeah, 5 Rebels, 3 Waratahs, and 2 Reds. So the 2 teams which won Super Rugby for Australian teams in the last decade have the fewest number of players, which is curious. Anyway, cheers guys. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.